Okay, now we've got record on. Can you hear us? Yes, okay. They can hear us.
Yep.
Okay. Amy, are you? Wait a second. Inner detail here. Huh?
May want to move the microphone a little closer though.
It might be good if I plug it in.
Oh, that would be helpful. Yeah, there we go. I thought I heard Karen say something or start to say something. Then I realized maybe the external mic is close.
It's been too long since we met.
We this year. Amy, can you represent me and John?
Can you hear?
Ask if it's just me and not John being.
Just- Okay.
Yes.
How exactly to go about this in terms of, you're the one that's going to have to be rewriting this. So, how would you like us to deal with the comments that came in?
Yeah, we were discussing in this little group on Zoom before. Like Matt was saying, there's some themes, and even with Jared sent this afternoon, he kind of put some categories. You know, there's some that are just kind of very small things that are easy to fix. Trying to think of one, like, I don't know, one sentence wording changes that seem very fine, you know, like still in the same spirit. But then, yeah, if we went over Jared's, these are some of the bigger issues, you know, and see if you agree with those.
Well, there seems to be some added to the goals.
Can you bring the mic closer, John?
Yeah, I can.
There seems to be some desire to add to the goals. And also, there, are some things that perhaps we should be adding to the, for instance, there's the suggestion that there be an executive summary, and that might be really very important, because I think I'm finding that it's people who are reading this over do not necessarily understand or pick up how the master plan is to be functioning, and some of its assumptions that the committee has come to. So there are some major changes that may have to be made.
Well, I'm confused. There is an executive summary. So
Those
It's
comments
short
from
and
Liz, that like page from Liz, those we got a while ago, like before that was from the draft report. And I thought we addressed them, you know, we talked about them and made the changes we were gonna, you know, I thought those were already done.
yeah, there is an executive summary, so I think we're good there.
Well,
And
Reordered some of the sections, you know, we moved the history, and there's some other things that happened from the draft to the final.
Maybe I should have looked at it, but I think some of the concerns that came up on these questions should have been answered in the executive summary. And I'm talking about the big picture concerns, not the, some people came to the reading this with some assumptions that, it's what a master plan is, and I don't think that really is accurate. Wanting to get into the nitty gritty, for instance, master plans don't do that. That could be mentioned in the executive summary.
maybe we could do that as part of the outreach when we roll out the final version of the plan and address it in a public venue. But in terms of big picture topics, I mean, the one that I'm thinking of is this transportation piece, which came up several times from folks. And the second piece would be the historic guideline piece, the historic preservation section. I mean, those are kind of like two no-brainers, just in my mind, to kind of save time, those would be two ones that I put on the table that unless there's something objectionable, they're pretty easy to edit into the big document. What is
Yeah,
there?
I agree. I just want to make sure everybody is good with those, you know?
The transportation plan, there's some aspects of it that are too much of how to get it done as opposed to the grand picture. Because
Right,
and I don't think that really applies.
It needs to be condensed down
The
quite a
areas
bit.
that talk about in the sidewalks, and I think the last paragraph from there, like somewhat on, but the middle seems to be more of a how-to, which I don't think we should be getting into.
So would everybody be agreeable? We could let Amy work on that and do a little massaging so that she could help do a higher cut that would work? Okay.
Right, because that, you know, she doesn't have the funding sources or other stuff that we put into our goals section. So yes, I would take what she had and the sentiment. You know, and a lot of that as we mentioned before, is mentioned in other parts, but not specifically in its own transportation section. So I think, you know, it's good to call it out for people. These are all the transportation things to address. But right, like you're saying, I can make it fit into our report from this, you know, these issues.
Yeah, and to John's point earlier, there could be a paragraph in the executive summary of, you know, what is a comprehensive plan and sort of the detail level to expect for the reader. But,
Yeah, you can look and make sure that's more explicit.
right.
No.
I mean, people get caught in the weeds no matter what.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Mhm.
Especially, you know, board members who are in the weeds, you know, that's their whole job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the
So,
thoughts that so people coming back and saying, well, why is this important? Why should this be important? And those two or three questions that I have in mind all relate to what we work on as well, creating a destination, creating Ballston Spa as a destination. And, you know, first, the obvious one is the charging stations. We're not talking about charging stations necessarily for the residents. They could have their own parking at home when they have electric cars. We're talking about charging stations for visitors who may come from 35 miles away, need to have their car charged to go home. And it's, you know, the things that tie into a finding to be a destination, and people are not necessarily understanding the importance of Ballston Spa becoming a destination to this master.
I have a different maybe perspective on some of these comments, specifically on like EV charging stations. There were several comments about lack of space for EV chargers. I think that's a separate issue that other administrations could possibly take on. I think the perspective this committee and this document take on is one of themes. Like they're not edicts or dictates. They are like themes. So basically it's guidance, it's objectives. So people are kind of getting stuck in like, oh, how come you were a little light in this area? How come you didn't touch upon this? It's like, well, either that concept didn't come up, or we didn't want it as a priority, or we deemed it lower level in the weeds that a current administration needs to figure out how to implement an idea that we provide. So under that perspective, EV charging stations, I think it is personal opinion. I think we do need to have EV charging stations. The concern people have are we don't have many parking spots and they're going to crowd. I would say that's not the purview of or perspective of this of the idea being put forth. I think the master plan should include it, and it's up to future administrations how to best implement it. And given the consideration of having minimal parking spots, that's up to them to figure out how to do it. It's because it's just guidance.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Matt. And that one of my comments earlier was we had a project in front of the planning board and we had suggested EV charging stations to the developer. And his argument was, well, I don't want to give up my parking spots for the EV station. So I think that needs to be something where the village kind of has to take the lead on, because you're not going to get the developer to do that. So I think it's the village did dedicate a few spots, I think that would help.
The,
And
um,
if I may chime in as well, I would, I agree with both of you and what you just said. And I think it's short-sighted to dismiss EV charging stations as part of this plan, given the popularity and, the increase, the increase they've had lately. But also, I think personally, I would be and I don't have an electric vehicle, I have a hybrid, but I would be disappointed if our document didn't include that in there, because that is forward thinking. And I think we talk about progress, and quite frankly, it's coming. We can deny it all we want, but the option should be there.
And some of the issues that were raised, like we don't want to give up spots. Maybe we take a different approach. Maybe other administration take a different approach. For example, if all spots in the parking lot are full and the only ones, then at that time you can park there. Like, if not, then you cannot park there. There's like, you can be flexible, and there's ways to get around it that we can either be creative or not. But yeah, it should be, and that's just one example of other themes throughout the plan.
and we'll talk about, before the meeting began, we were talking, and, one of the thoughts I was trying to articulate was that, and this is where the executive summary comes in, that the master plan is out there to try to lay out the concerns and needs and why they are concerns and needs. It is not there to figure out how they're to be done or what is to be done to achieve
That's
it.
right.
Well,
That's
that decision, that is left to the decision makers in the future.
That's right. And so to that point, I think Liz provided some comments back about how to stack rank some of these priorities. And I was kind of on the fence about that. Do we want to really go through the exercise of taking all the recommendations we had and like stack rank them? Like,
So that was when I remember from the draft to the final, there was, I made the kind of the box around the two biggest priorities. That's how I addressed that. I was like, these two things are very big and could make a difference. The rest, it's in short term, medium term, long term. That's as
Well,
far as I think you
I
really
think
need to
that's,
go.
yeah, I think that's how we essentially prioritize. What do we need to focus on now, later in the future? And that would be the most rudimentary prioritization. How prescribed do we really want to be?
Right. We're not doing the job of the boards, like we're not saying exactly when to do what and with what money and where it comes from. We're saying these are the types of things, and you got to find the money, and maybe you can get a grant here and maybe you can get a grant there. But
Right.
no,
I was
I'll tell you
just-
exactly
no.
how to do everything.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about maybe some potential downsides of ranking them too. Where it's almost like when the money and the funding becomes available, then take advantage. And if they were ranked, it might just, discourage doing things out of order.
I have a concern where if 5 years down the road, all of a sudden one of the top recommendations becomes moot or irrelevant, or a situation occurs to the village where something else has to become an immediate need. Who knows what happens? And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, this document is now the whole document as a whole is now looked at like, oh, well, the priority is off on one or two. Therefore, the whole entire document needs to be kind of dismissed. That's a little, I have a concern about that too.
That's a very good point.
Absolutely.
They say that awful lot of.
I can't, is somebody speaking?
Yeah, you have to come up here.
Yeah,
Things
Liz
that-
was just saying we have a lot of goals.
Yeah, that's where it was coming from. We had so many that, if somehow the themes or something to, if you're gonna work on. You have limited capacity, limited resources, limited money, everything else. What are the top areas that you feel we should do?
Well, Liz, you can reference this document that we're putting together, and that's why you get paid the big bucks, right?
Well, I think the comprehensive plan should have.
No,
not
I don't,
just
I
a
don't, I don't.
laundry list of goals and let us pick which ones we think is.
I'm having a hard time hearing her.
Yeah, what was the last one?
Yeah.
I said, when you look at other comprehensive plans, is is infrastructure more important than fixing the park? Or, or doing the trail? It would be helpful if we had the opinion.
Again, that gets out of the why and into the how,
That's right.
something that.
We don't have situational awareness to make that determination in this document. This document is used for guidance, not to influence decision making, not to make the decision. So perhaps their infrastructure is more need than fixing a park on November versus right now. We don't know. That's not what this document is.
New York City does participatory budgeting every year now, and they've been doing more and more, putting more money. It's like the council members, their discretionary budget, it's usually around $1 million, and they ask everyone in their district, what do you think we should spend the money on? You know, there's things like that where you can, I don't know if you want to do it every year, but like, you know, figure out somehow
then you
a critical mass of
Then you can reference the document saying, does that recommendations do those?
these are all the short term, yeah, like which 5 do you want to tackle this year? You know, like there's
Use
another.
it as a screen and just filter them to the master plan.
And then one of the comments was about, you know, how do we make sure this plan gets done? Well, you know, that's
Well,
comes up
I
to the,
understand where you're coming from, the residents deciding, but the thing is, as far as infrastructure goes, things are deteriorating. Well, right, who knows? We're not in the water tank, we're not in the sewer lines, we're not in any of that. So for us to say, let's prioritize for infrastructure here, like say 5 years down the road, where let's do this now. That all might change when the water tower springs a leak and then suddenly we have to replace this. And then you guys, it's your job to prioritize it.
Saying big picture. Where should we put? If we have limited resources and limited dollars, where should we put those dollars? In your opinion, not in our opinion, but in the residents' opinion. That's where it was coming from.
I think that's
Because
very.
we had such a long list.
That the decision making.
Can't hear you.
If you want to leave it up to us.
Yeah, and I think it's situational because we don't have a crystal ball, and so
That's right.
that's always on demand situational
And that's all
decision.
we're saying.
Yeah.
And you also have to realize that residents change over the years too. So depending on the public's opinion, what we have now might not be the same in
Right.
5 years.
Yep.
So we decide this now, we prioritize things and all that's what you're saying now. In 5 years, that might change. In 10 years, that might change. Who knows?
And this
We don't
master
know-
plan is a screen. You just use it and filter all of that real-time changing opinions through this to say, through the lens of the master plan saying, does this align with what we've planned in the past?
Mhm. Right, in 10 years, we'll be doing it again, you know, so.
30 years, 30 years.
No,
10.
yeah,
All right, so move
refugees.
meeting along here. Let's go back to like the approach. How do we want to go through some of these comments? I know we all have gone through them and kind of, I don't know, hopefully we've made notes. Do we want to, I'll throw out 2 approaches. One is we all step through the document together and we call out specific areas that we want to call out, and then we say yay or nay, or do we want to go person by person through?
What was the last?
Person by person.
Off the top of my head.
I think we want to go through through the comments that came in and know what you think.
So do we want to go page by page through it?
Well, I think Jared's is a great
Well,
start.
No, it's funny about the active comment.
Yeah, so I'm just asking, did everybody agree that we could put this in the mix and give this to Amy?
Yeah.
For her, okay, so it's the rest of it that we have to look at.
What do you mean by?
You're talking about the transportation section?
Yeah, transportation and historic preservation.
John,
I
yeah.
thought 15 minutes ago, we said we developed consensus on that. Hand it over to you, and then Amy, if anything had to be a higher cut, you could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
there's
must have missed something.
still a lot of other.
This was a while ago. This came in from Liz right after we handed it off.
Wow.
You know,
It's gotta be a condensed version. I mean,
yes.
It is.
Yeah.
No,
also,
condensed it
you know,
down to
they-
this.
Yeah,
Oh,
you just said, and Amy would do that.
I think if you go back into our various meetings, you'll find that bicycle lanes and things like that were not a high priority. Sidewalks were the major priority for transportation.
But didn't we have a separate transportation master plan?
Yeah,
Um,
so there is a bicycle and pedestrian master
Bicycle and
plan
pedestrian.
yes.
out there, and we do reference that.
Because, and I think we specifically left out those pieces on purpose because we had a pedestrian bicycle master plan, right?
Right, we didn't go super
That's
into
just, you do, and it was referenced, and I think that's adequate. I mean,
Yeah. That's my recollection. And could have been other components of a transportation plan that we can add to this. But I think the bicycle pedestrian components, we wanted to purposely leave out because we had our plan already running ahead of this.
So are you saying you wouldn't now agree to include that transportation piece that
I
Amy's
mean,
going to shorten?
But
no, that's nothing. That's.
what would be the purpose relative to linking to it?
So that it doesn't look like the steering committee omitted it?
But if we reference it and link to it,
yeah, I
I'm
think,
just wondering like what potatoes, but I'm kind of like potatoes, potatoes.
It should be referenced then in the goals area under
Right.
transportation.
Yeah,
Because
because
you look
that's
at
what
You
we're
know, you're just saying, you know,
Right.
that's usually, there's always a section for transportation and this one doesn't really have it. And it
Yeah,
feels
I-
like it's missing.
right,
And we'll talk about it other places on the report. It'd be good to just say, you know, these are our top priorities and go see this large master plan, you know, that we.
yeah, it's missing from the goals section. It's sort of talked about in some of the other parts, but it's missing from the goals. So I think part of that would be condensing what Liz had put together and even referencing the pedestrian plan in the goals.
Which I think one of hers does, right? I think Liz says like implement all the recommendations from that.
Right.
I think she has that in there.
Yeah.
So yes, I
If
think,
you're going to do that, perhaps you might want to just pull something major, the major things out of the transportation plan and put them in. Because people are not necessarily going to have the transportation plan at hand when they're reading the master plan 10 years from now.
And exactly, and that's where Jared's comments came in, those two short-term and medium-term comments. If we could include that part of his comments in the mix for Amy to distill.
Yeah.
And use that as a high cut, that's what I would propose, just so we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that.
yeah, put that in that, so transportation. Sounds good to me.
Exactly.
Yeah, so our pile is getting smaller. We may get to the speckled pig eventually.
What else can we throw in Amy's lap?
Yeah.
I mean, I assume all of it goes on my lap. Oh, I mentioned to this couple people on Zoom before, the thing about the smart growth and it kind of
Oh, yeah.
being a little
Yes.
political
Yeah,
thing.
I'm glad you brought that up.
So John Bean and I were talking earlier, you know, smart growth is its own thing. The Department of State talks about it, you know, like it's not a political thing, but if it would make it easier, we can change the word because we're not like Trustee Baskin says, like if we want to do a big, put in all the 10 principles or like do more of a explainer, that would probably clear it up. But if we don't want to do that, we can just change it to like, you know, another word that means the same thing.
What is the objective is,
Comments, I found it interesting. It seems that smart growth was more of a catchphrase for everybody. And either positive or negative catchphrase, but even the people who thought it was positive, some of their other comments to me seem to be anti-smart growth. So, you know, I think it gets in the way at this point.
Yeah.
well, the
We were
local
thinking,
smart
like,
growth, the smart growth.
Compatible,
Ballston spot is-
compatible growth, you know, it's like it's compatible.
The negative connotation because of Ballston, smart growth Ballston, and that's really all it is. So it's really just about removing or separating any perceived like alignment with that group. I think may do not necessarily the notion of smart growth itself, just the affinity to that group. It's really close in nomenclature.
Yeah, so Amy, will you take that on?
Yeah, were you thinking just saying like compatible growth or just talking about it that way where it's all about,
That's a good
you
word.
know,
Choice,
it's smart, but it's smart for you and it's tailored to your place. And that's why
Smart choice.
Could I suggest that you don't use a catchphrase at all, but you actually describe what you're talking about?
tax.
Well,
kind of like the growth that is compatible with the village as it.
yeah, what is that growth?
Right.
Is it, what growth are you actually talking about? Use,
Like just define what smart growth is. Just go in a few
Right.
sentences instead of using smart growth. Just like actually go out and describe what smart growth is. So
Right,
that way
without
folk-
using the term.
Exactly. So that way
Talking about
folks aren't like
compatibility.
thinking, that's
Yeah.
right. So folks aren't thinking like, oh, smart growth Ballston, is that what they're meaning? No. No.
Yeah, use
It
the
is a trigger.
attributes.
That word
Yes,
is a trigger.
It
to a
is,
lot of people.
it's a lightning rod.
And Matt, you said it perfectly. I think we should just do away with the word and just use our definition of it. Explain to people what we mean, then everybody in our village is gonna be happy.
Yeah.
And that's the exact way to deal with it, right?
Fix it.
Right?
For a few moments until something else happens.
Hi, John, how you doing?
Yeah.
Can you hear us okay?
He's gotta mute himself.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
You can't see us because we were having problems with the video, so we just turned ourselves off.
Oh, should I turn, am I okay?
Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. As you can see, I'm in the middle of construction down here.
What about the whole conversation about ADUs?
Yeah.
That's another one.
Well. I think we're okay on that.
I thought you guys described it perfectly, and then it's them to decide what to do.
Right.
I think in the plan, it's perfect. I wouldn't change anything. They decide where we're going with it.
Yeah.
We did what we did, just like I completely disagree with this enforcement of this sidewalk code, tax or fee. That's
Oh, yeah.
Pete Martin. I don't want that. But there's another side that does want it. Jared wrote the perfect response, and that's what we should use. Repair and replace sidewalks in accordance with enforcements of the new code sidewalk code. They'll decide what we're gonna do.
Right.
Pete Martin doesn't like it, but somebody does like it. Ben likes it, right? A tax or fee. He didn't put fees. It was a fee. So I think the way Jared put it, there's most of Ben's comments I can understand, but they're too involved. We already hit all this in a very good way in that comp plan. I read that comp plan several times just to get through it and understand it real well. You guys did a great job writing all that up. I mean, a phenomenal job. And I think this is just overkill now. Like all this is overkill. We hit it all right in there. There's nothing here that like Ben wrote that we didn't cover. He's just expanding on it, which is okay, but we already hit it. Now they decide what to do.
The details.
Right. Yeah.
Sounds like he's got a great idea for.
Yes, I do want the
Visual.
side, right, Liz just said it right. I want the sidewalks fixed too. I don't agree how they want it done. That's Pete Martin doesn't agree with this. So let them decide what to do and I'm adamant about it. So I'll stop saying that.
Yeah, no, the master plan agrees, like,
Yeah, right.
master plan agrees with what they want to do and how they want to implement it. That's on them.
Correct, it's up to them, right? So we don't need to, we already hit. You hit, I wasn't here for half of this. You guys did such a great job with this. You hit everything that you could think of. It's so much better than the other comp plans that were done. I just think when I read this, and you guys hit everything on the button. This is just getting more involved and we don't do it. I like adding a historic thing. This, it's important about the transportation and the sidewalk, so a blurb about that's okay, but a lot of this other stuff, I don't agree with Airbnbs and R1, but you've already stated that in there. I mean, so then it's up to the board to decide what they want to do. I
So let
think,
me ask a
we
general
hit-
question.
yes,
all of these recommendations that were in the mayor's PDF that were provided to us, there were quite a few, 12 pages worth. If we do, well, regardless of whether we address each specific one or not, what is the default position of all of this input? Will it be added to the comprehensive plan, or is it up to us to walk through and determine out of all that?
Did you see Frank's letter? He had like a separate letter.
I think I did, but I didn't catch his drift. What
I
was
thought from what he said, it was like, it's up to you.
Up to
Add
us,
it or
right?
don't.
Don't let, oh, that's right, he did. It was up to us, don't feel pressured, that kind of thing. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
if we don't talk
yeah.
about it now, it won't make it into the plan, basically. Is that?
Right.
Correct.
Right,
I should warn you, Amy, you can't see him, but the mayor is here.
yeah, it's right there.
I've been seeing.
Using shade.
Did I do it right? Am I getting the right sentiment? That's what I took from it.
Hiding in the corner.
Well, you know, with the Airbnb, well, there was one person who said, well, you had 70-some% of the people, they wanted one single families. Why do you want, not Airbnb, but the accessory building?
ADUs, yeah.
But when you look at the question that they were they were answering, it didn't have that issue in the question.
Also, ADUs are accessory dwelling units on single family. I mean, it's.
Oh,
still
no,
single family.
it is not.
It's an accessory use.
The way the question was set up, there was no inkling of having accessory dwelling units in a single family house. That
Right.
was,
It's not like they said they didn't want it. They weren't asked if they
No.
wanted it.
it was not, it's not, it wasn't even part of the question.
Right.
It's the way the question was phrased. So be it. I mean, but, and not only that, because the question of the using the accessory dwelling units is multifaceted, really. You know, we're dealing with the fact that they were going in anyway. And then there's a perceived need. Also, we want to be able to make housing more affordable and all of this.
Well,
So,
there was a perceived need, but I don't know. I think the general consensus of ADUs in general was of a negative tone in general. Now, you can write any survey any which way to tell it to prescribe any output you
that's right.
raise questions and get the answer you want. That's just statistics 101. But the general theme of ADAs, people don't want them. They want to focus primarily on single family housing. And there's many, and it's multifaceted, multivariable reasons why. Be affordable. My thing on affordability, Village of Ballston Spa has a lot of relatively smaller houses, single family homes within the village, it is relatively affordable relative to the surrounding area. That's really what the perspective has to be, is if you start looking outside of the village, there's going to be far more rentals. There's like, I don't know, you go south on 50, I count 5, soon to be 6 and 7 apartment units within 3 miles of downtown. So my point is affordable. I think it's affordable now compared to what the market bears outside of the village.
No, but not in the future. The other thing is.
We're talking about now. That's the master plan for now.
The housing that really needs the ADUs around the western, the east and into the southern part of the village. They're not necessarily up in the northern part. Although there are some, so you can make arguments for some up there, but you've got some really, really large houses that can't be single family houses. Economically, it's not viable.
Yeah, my take on the ADUs was I think our recommendations and the stuff we said about it in the comprehensive plan was good. And the next step is for it to go to zoning and
Yep.
there's a figure
That's
out.
zoning design,
a place
Yeah,
of-
that's where you fight about it.
you know?
And that gets
I couldn't
to,
agree with you more on that. And
yes, that gets to my exact point. We
Right.
hit everything already
And we
in the
talked
comp
about-
plan. Now they gotta decide the zoning, the planning.
Right, we
the
talked
board.
about that moving ahead in zoning too, where currently there's this R1 district that's massive throughout the village and not all R1s are equal.
No.
You know, Pete's R1. I
Different
can
than-
walk to
Yep.
Pete's house in 3 minutes and it's much different than the R1 zone that I live.
Right, yes.
Um,
And that's the zone, that's gonna be zoning issues, but we've already hit on it in the comprehensive plan. There's no reason to talk about it anymore in the plan. They
Right,
gotta
yes, I do.
implement what they wanna do.
You talked about redoing the zoning, so there you go.
And you're right, the comprehensive plan says, hey, you may want, to have layers on R1 or whatever, how you want to do it.
Not
Do it.
to do it, right, that's right.
It should be up to the planning board and the rest of it. It shouldn't be up to this committee.
No, we were supposed to do a generalization, which you did do.
Right, I agree, yeah. There needs to be something in the zoning for an ADU so that people that want them, they have some guidelines and there's some guidance there.
And
And
it
the
is,
zoning board has something that they can enforce.
and it's the exact same issue with the transition zones. On
Right.
CBD.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, that was one of the comments about transition zones and then was the public outrage. But in my, in my opinion, the transition zones already exist.
Well, yeah,
they're
they're going to
there,
exist
right?
whether they declared or not. So it's happening. It's going to happen. It has happened. What I don't
Yeah,
understand.
you're almost doing it backwards. You're writing the zoning
Kinda.
there already.
Right.
Just to give the people some freedom of what they can do with their property.
It's really how those transition zones play out. And
Mhm.
again, that's a function of whatever the next stage is.
Right.
But, you know,
Yep.
it's not that they're not in transition right now, because they are.
Somewhat.
It's just the how part. And I think that's what the big, you know.
Yeah,
do-
devil's in the details, but the details come later.
So,
Right.
right, so to Marilyn's point, I think the plan hits on the head. We want to establish transition zones. We don't care where they are, what they are, how they are, but that's a concept that we want the zoning board to consider.
Right.
Yeah, my argument would be they're already there, just right. Into the zones.
Right. There's only so many directions Ballston spot can grow.
Yeah.
Well, can I just qualify something Matt said? We might care about where they are. Depending on,
Not this board, though.
no, but I mean, depending on the perception of this board promoting something like, you know, okay, cannabis adult entertainment zone, where it might conflict with the surrounding part of the village.
Yeah, but we have.
So
to-
that's just a little.
That's in there, right? Like,
That's a touchy thing we have to be aware of, because we do have an adult entertainment zone, you
Right.
know, and so we just have to be aware of how that transition
But I think that
happens.
that's kind of built in with the land use map, right? Where we have just sort of a bubble diagrammatic. view.
So would it be okay, for example, just to talk about this, if the transition zone for that adult entertainment area went more towards the Malta Avenue
Right.
location, we would all have a problem with that, right? So I mean, getting back to transition, we recognize it's there. Hope the transition is done tastefully and sensitively with respect to the existing community part of that village that we're dealing with, and that it's appropriate for that part of town. Because
Sure.
if you listen to Matt, it can happen anywhere. Village. We need to be more sensitive.
Maybe I'm wrong. The question with the transition zones is the transition from residential to downtown. Right.
Yeah, we understand that.
And be something that vision to promote home businesses. And not to have necessarily a storefront in downtown. That's not in a residential area. but-
Devil's in the details.
Yeah.
You know,
but that's-
we don't
that's
need
the
any more
transition.
tattoo parlors or a
No,
cannabis
No.
parlor
No.
or something else happening as a creep in that transition area. And again, we just
Yeah,
have
so
to
that
be
would-
sensitive to that.
Right, and that would fall back
Yeah.
into zoning
Yeah.
or what's allowed, that transition zone and.
Yeah.
But do we want to, maybe to feed off of, or build off of Marilyn's point about transition zones, do we want to qualify any type of transition zone from our perspective? Like, do we want to help provide guidance on the type of transition zones? I don't think we get any lower than
That's the
that.
next subcommittee.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, we
okay.
have residential transition and we have downtown transition, so we have two different ones.
So we've hit the nail on the head then. I
In
think.
residential, we say, commercial uses allowed in this area will be mostly limited to professional offices with little impact to the surrounding neighborhood. You know, so we talk about that.
that's the
sensitivity.
truth.
Right, and we,
I think we're good. I think we're fine.
yeah, I agree. I think we sort of define them at a high level.
Yep.
Where they need to be.
Mm.
One thing that came up in the ZBA comments and also in Rory's comments is about the floodplain.
Yeah,
Mm.
It is in there, but, and this was one of my questions too during our work, is if there's an opportunity to get the village out of the floodplain, what is that? Like, is that a thing? What would that proceed?
know how-
And is that something
I
the
don't know.
village could explore?
that's
I don't know how they
something,
can. Twice in my lifetime where I lived down on Kent Street, over on Liberty and stuff is already flooded. That's 2 times since I've lived there 30 years. So we are in some sort of flood zone, so.
Well, you are, John.
But I don't think,
What we heard from Blue Niels is because of the wide floodplain from Kelly Park east down to Cater Ross. Along Old Post Road in that area, that all the waters are able to be let out of the village.
Big floodplain, yeah.
Yeah, except for by the confluence of the Cater Ross to the Gordon, which is exactly where you are. And
Oh, so he's talking about it's oversized compared to history.
yeah,
yes,
And he says that getting another assessment.
history changed in 1947, 49, because they got rid of the main channel of the Kid Ross Creek, which went between Mechanic Street and Milton Avenue. So
Yeah, behind the church, down behind the church, yeah.
yeah, and so there is a real possibility of being able to get a good portion of the village that's in the floodplain out.
that could be that could be a environmental transition zone.
You know,
To go from a residential / industrial zone to something that's more resource protective. I'm just proposing that. You said get the village out. You meant relocation of those properties.
no, get the flood zone out.
Yeah, the flood zone.
Flood
Now
zone.
you-
Yeah, getting FEMA to change the map.
It's not
Good
gonna
luck,
happen.
good luck with
Yeah.
FEMA. We're dealing with that
Yeah.
down here. So.
it's actually in our minutes, if not in the master plan itself, that talks about the fact that any flooding would be minor,
Well,
and that perhaps that should be.
Are
in the
you
master
willing
plan
to-
itself.
Yeah,
stake
so
your
to-
claim on that.
Yeah. No, that's what Blue Niels.
Right, so
He's the expert.
yeah, to the point of the comments, that even if anecdotally the flooding is minor, you're still in the FEMA floodplain, there are still
Right.
ramifications to that.
Right.
Yeah,
So how does the village get that
My-
part of?
yeah, that was my question
Yes.
is that a possibility? And is that something the village should explore, is having that floodplain area reduced?
Yeah, I think it is something, but I don't know if it should be in the,
I mean, that,
Maybe just a
that involves
sentence of
paying for
something.
remapping.
Right.
right, yeah.
Does the village have money for that? Usually those situations only happen after you have a declared emergency, a storm event, there's economic damage,
Yeah,
and
humans are
the
good at
community
reacting.
actually makes the offer to relocate that part of the community like they've done in Gilboa and other places.
Oh, I'm not talking about moving, I'm
Yeah,
talking about redrawing the map.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's money.
Yeah.
That's money, that's
In
a long-term planning event.
That's
I
again,
don't-
that's the how do you do it? I think the only key thing on the table for us to do is say, do we want to have that map redrawn or not in the future at some point? As a
Right.
long-term- As a long-term option, have that map redrawn in hopes that we can reduce the footprint of the flood. That's
Right.
everything.
You're
Yeah, I
saying
guess
like, you
that-
would say you wanna get an expert to look at the
Mhm.
floodplains and sort of petition, have an expert give you opinions that you can then petition to FEMA and ask for reduced areas.
Right,
That's- I mean,
So do we want to put that in as a long-term option?
yep, that'd be a long time.
under the structure. with
Any,
this-
any opposition to adding it as a long-term?
Okay. Yeah, I'll put it in here with the stormwater management, sewer mapping, et cetera, put it under there.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of that, yeah.
There was one comment about the climate refugees. And I think it was misinterpreted, and maybe we want to be more precise, more accurate in the master plan draft, but we're talking about people of means. People who are going to be bringing their work here and their businesses here. Because the people who don't have means, that's another 25 or 30 years down the line. But in the next 10 to 15 years, there's a good number of relatively wealthy people who are going to be coming to the Northeast, and we should be positioning ourselves to take advantage of that.
Can we change that wording? Refugees just.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a trigger.
I want to strike the whole climate refugee stuff. That would my opinion.
if we clarify that, just showing an example, what I wrote down was Florida retirees or people living in coastal areas. That's really what, as one example of what we mean. We don't mean international,
And
refugees crossing the border. We're
Yeah,
really
I could say like those in domestic coastal areas who can no longer, due to climate change, they can no longer rebuild and stuff like that.
we already have people living in the village who consider themselves climate refugees.
I would say a bigger influx is going to be from Global Founders and AMD and wanting to start a family because the jobs are coming in. Those would probably be a bigger push to locate here versus
Maybe, but historically.
Yeah.
maybe it is happening.
Maybe we could change the word, something about relocation, just around that whole concept of people relocating intentionally. So like, I do think there will, I'm sure that we will have people move to the Northeast because one, push or pull factor, right? But I think economically, I kind of agree with Matt here that that's in the next 10, 15 years, I think we're going to see economic pulls to this area more so than the climate, although not to dismiss that is definitely significant.
I agree with
So-
Monique. The general trend is a mass exodus out of New York State. It's the number one gross exporter of people. The only reason I see in the next 5, 10, 15 years is for economic incentivization to be here, and that vis-a-vis jobs. And that's going to be the primary, if not the number one primer driver for in like coming here as opposed to leaving.
Yeah, I mean, we lost two reps in the House of Representatives last census. So I
And
mean,
we're projected to lose another one next few years.
yeah, so to Florida, so we're in Texas, so we're seeing that change.
I would not put New York, Ballston Spa with the rest of upstate New York, just because of the unique position.
I agree. We should put Saratoga County is unique in general, as a county is unique in all of upstate New York. Maybe there may be one out in Western New York, but is probably the most well-positioned county in upstate by bar none. Agreed. And that's
and
because of jobs.
healthiest county
Because
too.
of jobs. That's right.
I totally agree. Saratoga is there's the name recognition and it's affluent and there's still a lot of space in surrounding areas. So
They
I
want to move here
agree.
because of jobs.
Yeah, and it's a growing county in a declining state.
That's right. So, all right. So that's a very pithy statement you said. It's prosperous and growing county in a declining state. So how can we position that? How do we want to use that phraseology? Because I think we need to lean into that.
Let's get Amy to lean into that.
Yeah, we'll throw that in her lap.
Yeah, we have a similar sentiment somewhere. I'm trying to remember what section.
we
The
kind of
climate refugee thing was from the climate section, I think, so
Yeah,
changing that.
That is a climate effect. You don't want to take it out of climate.
right. And I didn't think the climate refugee thing, I didn't think that was out of place.
Right, I think if we just change the language to say people who are relocating because of the climate and get rid of the refugee word, I think that's.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think you could tone down the refugee.
There's a different section where we talk about how, it's well positioned in the county and I think you guys just want to add another sentence or two in that section and I'll try to find where that was.
I mean, one of the things to get across is that these are people with means.
Well,
These are
some,
they're
some
not-
of them are.
They're going to be bringing resources into the community and they're going to be demanding resources of the community.
Well, unless their place in Florida got washed away during the last hurricane, you know, you can't, I don't think, there's no data to indicate they've got means. It's just that they're in a vulnerable environmental area and they're looking to move to an area that's, relatively speaking, safe as it relates to weather-related disasters.
But they have to have the money to move. They have to have the flexibility to move. Now, if they're retired, they've got the flexibility. Those are going to be people who are of means. The people who are of less means are going to be moving later. They're going to be getting out later. That's beyond the time period of commitment.
Or John, are they going to be people who find new jobs and follow the job,
And
you
they're
know,
here.
from the areas?
Yeah.
Follow the job. Yep. Yeah, they would be more apt to follow the job.
And just a comment, since you talked about Saratoga County, basically being a very vigorous economic area. Could we also talk about Ballston Spa as the county seat? I think it was Ben that made a comment about that. We just need to kind of indicate that in the plan. He said, could add mention of advantages of being the county seat.
Yes.
Create stability, many daily visitors to the village, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's important. And there, I think whatever he put down here for a couple of sentences should be enough because it's really integral to the viability of the village.
I think that's in there.
Right. I agree. I know we talked about this, we talked about, oh, they're talking about leaving and should we mention it? And it never really got decided. And I think you're right that in the kind of introductory section, we talk about how it is the county seat and it is important to the economy. And then John Bean came up with, any county government like that who's pulling out of one's space, it's really up to them to come up with strategies because Ben mentions like, what would you want to do with that property? Is there any reuse opportunity or whatever? And it is, the county should create a plan and options. They shouldn't just pull out and leave you, holding the bag. So John thought we should write that in there, that it would be part of them to work with you about, they should work with you on what the future would entail for that property.
That last piece right there, I think is key for this then. Like, because we can't tell them to include it in, but we can say something along the lines you just said, work with the county to come up with a plan to, but actually, now that I think about it, do we really want to indicate that in a plan, 5, 10, 15-year plan?
If
Weird topic.
If I remember correctly, we already have in the plan, when we're talking about having to incur the number of people that come into the county who are using it and people who are living, working there. And all the school districts, we put them all together and say, look, they are a major economic force that ought to be developed even further. But I think that's about where we.
Yeah, just as long as that and whatever he put on the last paragraph is connected to the, basically the county reference and the fact that there's a county seat reference in the village. I think that would just do it.
Okay, so you don't want to talk about any future displacement?
No, I think we just want to drill down, since you talked about the vigorous economy of the
We're not
county.
sure it's gonna happen anyway.
Right, hopefully not. Okay, that's good.
What if you put in a sentence, something to the effect that maybe discussions should continue with the county to help to solidify the relationship we already had, something to that effect.
Can you expand upon that, John?
Well, it's a positive thing for us. And like, as you said, you didn't want to accent the negative of them leaving. Just mentioning that would put it in the minds of everyone that developing that relationship actually is important. And that kind of triggers the people on these other committees and the government positions to behoove them to discuss with the county.
Yeah, like
Because-
what is the actual issue behind why you might leave? Is it that the
Mm.
building is old, or, you know, and is there anything that can be done? Mitigate. Right, so just saying, let's work together, keep it a good
to enhance
relationship.
that relationship. Enhance that relationship, yeah.
Sorry, I just think it's a real possibility and when a community has a major employer and, you know, you don't have to address it specifically, but if you lose a major employer, what does that do and how do you, you know, what do you, I think John was pointing to creating a destination. Building housing or some other thing, you know, replace that because that's a major economic impact.
Is it for certain they're leaving?
It's not,
No,
but it's, they are seriously looking at the option. That's what I,
So I'm thinking about this document in 10 years. It can go either one of two ways. We say something about them leaving and like trying to work with them and backfill, and they don't leave. So the plan is like, or already like off the rails. Or we do work with them and plan and put something in that we're planning, and it could be. Which way do we want to go with this? Because it doesn't sound like it's 100% that they're leaving. So it sounds like the prudent way or the conservative way to look at this, it would be to not like tip the hat in this plan that they're leaving. And we're kind of worried, and that makes other people reading like, why are they worried? Why are they preparing for this? What does that mean? It could be more collaborative. I don't know, Amy, how to word this, but we would have to probably, thread the needle on this and maybe not allude to them leaving, but like work instead of alluding to like a vacancy, work with the county to promote whatever.
Just to give a little bit of insight, because I'm in for the direct communications with the county. I think honing in on the idea of continuing conversations with the county to enhance the relationship down the line is fair game. I think going further than that probably is perhaps making your document obsolete if, God forbid, the worst case scenario happened ultimately. Even as Amy's suggesting if there's a way out the door, which is, I am thinking becoming less and less likely based on the slowdown of how this has played out compared to a year ago. I think that the idea of making sure we do work with the county to say, how are we going to fill in these divots and gaps economically, because it is not in the county's best interest to see the village of Ballston spot fail. We are still in the center of the county, no matter how they posture themselves ultimately, and they still are giving the indication, even if the worst happened, that they would keep the name, the county seat and operations in here. So there's no absolute yes and absolute no scenario probably coming from this. It's a collaboration discussion ultimately that needs to continue no matter what. That's my 2 cents on that for you guys.
and it may take 10 years for them to even move out. If they were to move out, you don't know. So us putting that in the plan, in my opinion, is premature.
Yeah, my thought, when I read Ben's comment too, is part of it goes back to almost like a land use type aspect also, where if they do pull out, then how is that land sort of scheduled to be used? So right now we have county buildings that are in R1.
Historic.
So,
And the
Right,
historic
so- and the
district,
historic
we have
district.
no say so over anything, because they're not gonna ask us for a building permit. They're not gonna ask us for a review of the
But-
appropriateness of their new structure for a historic appearance. They're just gonna either leave the property like that or sell it, and it's going to get developed and go through the pathway to have the zoning changed. But I'm
Right,
not
so
advocating for that. I'm just ensuring that when we talk about how vibrant the county is, we make sure we position the village as the county seat, using Ben's 1 or 2 sentence
Right.
comment, and just make that connection so that no one glosses over the fact that it's an economic engine in the village.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, I guess what I was saying, what I was trying to say is, I don't think we need to go as far as saying, if they pull out, this is what should happen. But I think we should have the sort of land use in the area where the county is, where if they pull out, then something else can happen there. And either the buildings can be reused or.
That might be the how part that we're not prepared to
Right, that
talk
would
about
be-
now.
That would be in the zone, kind of sort
Yeah,
of.
if you want to rezone that parcel.
And I think, John, I think you were saying, we want to underscore the importance of working with the county.
Yeah.
And making communication, but when I think that.
Yeah. Correct.
Keep communication going. It's important for the village and there's an economic driver.
Yeah, I agree.
And
with
that's
all
what
that. I
the
think
mayor
we
just
should-
said, pretty much.
Yeah,
Exactly what the mayor, right, that's, you just said it in a nutshell, John. Yeah,
right. I don't think we need to go as
Yeah,
far as
no.
if they pull out, then,
right.
then
Yeah.
this is what we need.
I think Matt's correct on that.
Good.
The only other comments that I had were just nitty gritty. That related to, again, another thing, I think I've seen it in a couple of other people's comments. Would be helpful to have a map that included more street and street names on it, so people could more easily see where the boundaries are. And I think on Anna's comment, there was a comment about color of the shading of some of the maps, Amy. I would endorse both of those comments because I think anything you can do visually to make it clearer to the user what those maps are about would be very helpful.
Yeah, I didn't see the color when I saw, I see the street one about the land use vision map. I did look at it and say, yep, they can't really see the street. If you print it, you can't see the streets. You know, you have to zoom in on a screen to see them. So that's fine. We can call those out a little more. Or at least the major streets. The color one, is that for one specific map or? Let's see.
That was in the
I think-
ZBA
yeah,
comments.
Yeah,
There were several, some of the maps on if I remember correctly, the building age maps, the colors are so close, you couldn't
You
know.
can't tell, and it
Yeah.
depends on what computer you're on.
the legend,
They
the
look the same.
legend of some of the maps are so close in color
Yeah.
shade. It's very difficult to make the connection between the legend and the actual delineation of that area.
Yeah, I mean, that happens because there's only so many colors. Like when you have 20 things on your legend, trying to differentiate. Yeah, I can see what can be done.
Yeah, I was trying to find Anna's comment because she had a specific,
Yeah,
there were two of them that she thought were too close, but I'm not finding it right away.
mhm.
Better colors to distinguish single versus two-family homes. That was on the first page towards the bottom of her comment, the ZBA.
Okay. And the housing, okay. All right.
And being a member of the aging population, I wouldn't worry about us.
I think that was it.
Right, there was a comment about seniors and about,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I wouldn't worry about it.
Right. Well, I think when we do like Liz's, if you do the ADA accessible, anything that's ADA accessible should be accessible to seniors as well, right? Like that kind of hits
That's right.
Right.
two birds with one stone. So we could just say, and seniors. And a lot of that, like the social consideration, saying reaching out to young people and seniors, that's all easy, small changes. It was good.
I had one last comment that came up from Ben's comments. And it was something, was on the first page. Great history of the village included. Would be good to have a sentence or two about the Native American inhabitants in this area before Lau took over. So I did touch base with Ann Clothier, who is the education coordinator at the Saratoga County History Center. And she said that she would send me either a reference to a book or a few paragraphs about what could be said about Ballston Spa pre-white, colonial
I can tell you what
settlement.
you said about Ballston Spa in the pre-European settlement. It was a hunting ground, period.
And that's what I told her, but I'm looking for her.
Yeah, but which
Trying to figure out how to put that in.
tribes, which,
Yeah.
I mean,
And that-
cater us, right? That must be a Native American word. So just saying like what it means or
No,
what tribe
Probably-
named it and
Right.
what they used it for, that's good.
She
Amy,
said,
Amy, I can change that for you. Be at the point where we're talking about the geography. And I'll just throw in a phrase, probably even won't be a sentence. And I'll talk about how it was used with Native Americans, because it was just hunting. Didn't never lived here.
she said that the documents that were written at the time are not acceptable to be reprinted in a modern publication. So she would come up with some,
Don't tell her.
she would come up with some information and just send it to me. So if I get it in the next 2 weeks, I'll send that off to you.
Okay, great.
I've got two items that are of note here and from Ben's comments. The first one on page 2, under village staffing. He says he doesn't think it's feasible to create a position to focus on the public affairs and resident communication. I agree. And there was another comment about creating a position as well, somewhere else in the document, but I don't think it's about creating a position. I think we have to define a role of these needs, these village needs. It could be a role fulfilled by a new position or split among other positions, but I think being very, very clear, precise with the words of defining a role, not saying we are requesting a new position. I think the plan should define roles that are needed and how they're fulfilled and when. That's up to the board.
Yeah, and I know we talked about that and I think that's where we landed. So maybe it's just not that clear.
Yeah, roles versus new positions, perhaps something like that. The delineate between the two.
Yeah, I agree. Define the need and then let the village figure out how to fill the need, I guess.
Yeah, this committee had come up with a determination that they needed somebody to be in charge of information technology because of the great need to have people not doing things that will make us vulnerable to ransomware, and also making sure that the information technology is used.
In general.
But
yeah.
is going to be also in charge, another person that would be in charge of making sure there are community relations, like a public relations officer. We also talked a little bit about having someone actually acting like a city manager. And those were 3 different types of functions. And 2 of them we actually said you should hire somebody to do this. And that might be, like you were saying, too.
Too prescriptive.
Yeah.
Maybe just define the roles and however they want to fulfill said role is up to the village.
Mhm.
And there was another comment I noticed. There were several times it was mentioned onto both were like poo-pooing the idea, and I have a tendency to agree with them. I don't know if we're like a Saratoga Springs and have the foot traffic in Congress Park to use the bathroom. It seems like it's it seems like it's a relatively high maintenance facility relative to other areas of the village.
I totally disagree, Matt. The bathroom is absolutely necessary for the downtown. And for the downtown to expand to be a destination. If we're going to be a destination village, we need public bathrooms. I also think that it should be supported by the downtown, the businesses and property owners, rather than for the village in total. But that's a how rather than a why. But I think the public bathrooms in downtown are absolutely essential if the downtown is going to go the next step.
I agree. I agree.
To promote pedestrian traffic?
Hmm?
To promote pedestrian traffic and
No,
loitering?
It's to keep the shoppers in town. So they don't go to Stewart's and leave.
Not only that, when you have events like concerts at the park and movies and whatnot,
McDonald's, and that's okay.
if you have events in the village such as concerts in the park and the movies in the park, they have no place to use the bathroom. And little kids, they go to the bathroom a lot. So they have to find some place to go to the bathroom now. They're searching all over Front Street trying to find something.
I mean, all of that should be a BSBPA assignment. And communication with the library to keep the library open.
They don't want it.
Well, you know what, John? That's gotta change. It's gotta change. So if they're gonna have 500 people watch The Little Mermaid downtown, somebody's gotta make those operational changes.
And
make-
Rent a lot of porta potties.
so,
Yeah,
All right, so there's a need
yeah,
for
but-
bathrooms downtown.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Do we want to be less prescriptive than, like, public bathrooms seems to have a negative connotation on it?
absolutely.
Do we want to be less prescriptive of just say there needs to be a bathroom facilities are provided during business hours, or some bathrooms are provided that way? It doesn't necessarily have to
Public
be, we have to
bathroom.
build a new bathroom section right off the Winslow Park. It just needs, we need to have access and people know how to get to it.
What's so bad about
You
public
can go in
bathrooms?
many different places in town.
What's so bad about public bathrooms, that phrase?
Yeah, it
We-
is a public bathroom. I mean, it's.
We said in the report, it was all about signage. And even somebody else made a comment in the comments that we got that we needed to have signage. So between signage and cooperation with the downtown business partners, that can happen within a year and a half.
The,
I'm still stuck on the public bathroom thing, sorry.
you still, I don't think there's any other term other than public bathrooms. I mean,
I agree with
you
that.
say bathrooms for visitors. And, but still the same thing.
No, it's public bathrooms. Anywhere you go, it's public bathroom.
Well, is this something that, I
You
know
know-
this is not our purview to tell people how to do things, but with the library remodel, is there a way to maybe consider putting, an exterior, like a public bathroom in that remodel? So maybe we can look at
that's an idea.
spaces.
They looked at that
All I
already?
got for tonight.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
about the ends, not the means. Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem what?
Somebody's gotta, it's gotta have some oversight.
And
No, you
agenda,
segregate it different where I think you can segregate it, right? You can have it not associated with the building.
there are a lot of places, but big tourist areas.
Those bathrooms were very useful.
Small ones, if you go to the
Yeah.
Saratoga Springs,
You
they
just
had
can-
them at the Arts Center.
You just connect it
was
to
a
the building.
major disaster. They had people living in the public bathrooms. They're now going through that whole discussion again about public bathrooms. I just think we've got creative ways to handle it, but it's not a how right now, you know?
It's gonna be done.
Yeah.
We have to address the need for public bathrooms one way or another, and people are pushing back on the commentary of just loitering and vandalism. If those can be mitigated somehow and we phrase it that we need to accommodate the public bathrooms in some way, leave it for later, I think we're okay.
We have to have them.
We shouldn't dictate the how, we should just say there's a need for public bathrooms. The how, that's for the board or whoever else decide.
Agreed.
Yeah, right now we have build public bathrooms downtown. So we could just say facilitate public bathrooms. So,
Yeah, just different ways they could do it. They can open up a business or the library or whoever, they can dictate. If they don't want to build something, they can say this is available this such time. This is just an example. I'm not saying they have to do this. They can, this is available such time during concerts in the park, for instance. And just have some sort of facility provided, whether it's when it's made or I hate to say it, the library opens up their bathroom or something, just something.
And then I think once you do that, then there's going to be more of a recognition for the need for an actual second building. That's the
Correct.
start.
Correct.
That's
Yeah, start
not for
somewhere.
us to really into the how it's going to be working.
make public bathrooms available downtown. Because then we have identified sites for public facilities, you know.
Right.
Design and have signage. And install when funding's available.
Yeah.
I think we hit almost
There's
everything here, didn't we?
one area, I don't know how to bring it up. But I think the steering committee, looking at all the various. How the village is being used and the various illegal uses in the village and proven that the zoning laws really have to be changed and major changes. But it looks like people who are actually working with the zoning laws don't see that. As a problem. And
Yeah, that was interesting.
I'm not sure how to handle that.
Yeah.
Just enforcement, maybe.
Give us an example.
Well, we were taking care of EUs anyway, and it's only,
Yes, we are.
well, yeah, but they can only do it.
There was
Because
flexibility.
that's it's not being done properly, only for them.
Yeah, but that's only two people who really brought that issue up. And I'm not sure that's an unbiased opinion.
Okay,
Yeah, and some of those comments were a little contradictory because there was question about the term flexibility in zoning.
Right,
And then another comment about industrial zones and how it wasn't really appropriate where they were and there should be more flexibility in the industrial zones.
Sense.
Right.
anyway, I just put that out because it.
Zoning's gonna have their hands full. Whoever does the zoning in our village is gonna have their
Yeah.
hands full.
Anyone else with any other areas they want to discuss? Amy, how does everything sound to you?
Well, I think I have clear direction on most of these that I had a question about. Yeah, right, because I think a lot of these, then the rest of them are either too specific or, you know, will be
Yeah.
addressed later. So I think we got the major, you know, good ideas that we had to address.
You know, on the head when you said that, I think the plan we did was pretty good. but
Yeah, it's
The
got
ones,
tough.
the comments that I was making.
Can someone remind me about what we talked about in the parks, the needs for the parks? I'm seeing a comment here on page 7 in it. I just highlighted it, but I forgot the context. Park needs to be monitored if it wishes to be family friendly. Park also needs to be needs maintenance on a regular basis. I think they're referring to Kelly Park and some of the folks that live down by the river. and kind of like that connotation it has, and then to rebuild some of the, or maintenance, deferred maintenance on some of the park. What did we say in the plan with regards to maintenance to the parks?
I think just in general, we said they were a little bit underutilized.
Mhm.
And they could be more of an asset to the village.
That comment was dealing more with policing,
Yeah,
I think, rather than what we would be addressing.
Well, it also said support planning and development of a village-wide trail system. So there's, that part of the recreation picture there. But I guess I'd have to look at where the park section would be.
Right, we say expand recreation resources for village parks, development of underused parks, expansion of opportunities for residents to engage in recreation. Right, it's like if you're giving them more reason to be there, more people will be there, and the more people that are there, the less vandalism, it's like people are using it, there's less bad things happening, critical mass of people keeps it safer.
I think we had talked about maybe doing, I think I'd mentioned like whole village events like fireworks there. Maybe was that it? We talked about like doing like 4th of July there,
Right,
those kind of
Jackie.
events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was also a comment about the cemetery. The person who commented didn't realize that the cemetery association wants people there because it minimizes vandalism, and they want it to be used passively, and it's good advertising for the cemetery. It's not a secret.
Right, but they don't want, they don't want the area to become desecrated because people take it for a dog walk, through the cemetery, and that I fully support the comment that came through. It's just.
We put out some trash cans and give out the poop bags and.
Yeah.
No, those cemeteries, I believe they like the idea, and they may very well be putting out doggy bags for dog.
I thought maybe I already saw that when we were on the tour. Maybe there was a little.
Oh, no, I leave the cemetery comments exactly as they are in our report.
Cemeteries have to advertise.
They're quality cemeteries. What, this is maybe slightly off topic. Down at Kelly Park between the pavilion and the Castle Park, there's a fenced off, it looks like a brownfield site. It's fenced off and capped. Is that like a no-go zone for a particular reason?
We're working on that.
dog parks in the corner.
We're actually working to see if we can get some donation basketball to get the two possible sports, although we're gonna crowdsource this a little bit better, is basketball, pickleball out there, but we'll see what surveys come back with. But it is on our list to try to take care of it actually this year and get some activities back for the same reason you guys are talking about, having busyness in a park, helping to take away vandalism and vagrancy, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. So as long as there's a plan, then I guess I thought that may have been an opportunity to throw something like a one-liner in the plan just to tactically take care of that element, but it sounds like it's already being.
So, but it doesn't hurt to have it as reassurance from us.
Pickleball is like the fastest growing sport in America, I heard, so.
My wife just started, yeah, Donna's good at it.
So
That area.
If you
that area in the
play it,
park-
do you have to call yourself a pickler?
I think so,
That's
yeah.
one way to go for pickleball.
That area of the park was once used as a skate park for the kids. And the reason they stopped using it is that they didn't have anybody to monitor it. And they get people using it at night, and they're afraid of liability, so they took the ramps and things out. They're gonna have the same problem no matter what they do, is monitoring and watching it and supervising it. Especially if they put it in something that's activity for children.
Guess we're set.
Okay, Amy, how long would you think before we can see a new version?
Let's see. Yeah, maybe a couple weeks.
2 weeks is
Probably
good.
do it
Okay.
faster, but I would, yeah, 2 weeks would be good.
Great.
Other stuff.
So what is the next steps after Amy gets incorporates all of the red lines into the document? And now what? Where does it go? Does it go back to the board, or does it go on to the zoning board of appeals?
Well, I would ask you as a board to one more time, take a look at it, make sure you're all happy with it before you set it back up. Yeah. So make sure of that, and then Carla and I we're trying to figure out if it does have to go back up to the planning board at the very least, and that's a cute little dog there, Matt. I never
My dad's new puppy.
oh, very cute.
Not the village plan. board.
It's a question of whether or not it qualifies as true zoning or not. If it's considered a zoning amendment, and that's the question. So she's processing that right now. We'll figure that out. If not, either way, we may just circulate generally one more round of public, just to go toward public hearing. Got to set it anyway, so we'll get it out there for people to have enough time to read it for public hearing. And that's where we basically go with it. Amy, we have to do obviously seeker on our end. And we're going to not do a GEIS. We're going to do negative declaration approach as Carla laid out. So that will tighten up the time frame a little bit. But obviously there's a few things still left to be done. First thing we're going to do is wait for you to resubmit once you're all happy with it, because that's why we sent it back to you in the first place.
When is it needed by?
Right, I get it to you. County will get it. When does, say that again?
When is it
When is
needed?
this? Because this is an input to something else down the line, right?
Well, we can't do anything with zoning until this is done, because you can't put an RFP for zoning together until you actually have the comprehensive plan done, so that you're correctly reflecting the work in the RFP. So yes, we're waiting on that, but there's no absolute time limit on this for you guys, so don't feel that.
Well, that's where I was going. Like, is there any pressure from the outside to get this done, or like, what's the? Okay, all right.
That's about it.
Just as long as it's right.
Yeah.
No pressure. As long as it's right.
Just say what John Bean likes to say, a perfect plan is a done plan. No, you don't want it to linger forever. You know, like, it's done, you can always.
1993 and use that thing.
Yeah.
It's done.
No, thank you.
Amy, how hard would it be to highlight the changes, just with the track changes or something in Word as you're doing them? I don't know if they're.
That would be great.
That would help us.
Yeah, I can do that. That's not hard.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Mhm.
That just became 3 weeks now.
Right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, for all the work and coming back to the table on this. We do truly appreciate it. Can't say it enough times.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Cheers.
night.
They can't see us.
Bye, thank you.
Night.